on, everybody? Thank you so much for coming back to another video, and in today's video we're going to be talking about Bohemian Rhapsody. So I am incredibly sad that it took me this long to watch this movie and review this movie. This is one of those movies that I sadly wasn't able to see last year. It just wasn't really working for me timeline-wise as far as work schedules and things like that, and I just never was able to see it properly the way I wanted to in theaters. That's definitely a big bummer, but I was really anticipating this film. It was a highly anticipated film, a highly praised film, and a film I heard so much about leading up to it and after its release. And so finally I picked it up on Blu-ray, finally got to check it out, and I had a fantastic time with this movie. This film is about Queen, and more specifically the frontman of Queen, Freddie Mercury, who's played in this film by Rami Malek, which is a great choice. I think he did a phenomenal job in this role. It's really interesting to think back on this movie when they were first announcing it and first talking about it. They were talking about going more of the R-rated route and getting a little bit more into the darker side of what Freddie Mercury's life sadly became in the later half of his career. But yeah, they decided to go against that, and they wanted to make it a more hopeful film, which I do feel was the best direction to go. Maybe this film doesn't always tap into the darker elements of his life, but it does tap into them. There's definitely a lot about this movie that's very sad, and if you were a fan of Queen and a fan of Freddie Mercury, there's definitely a lot that's going to tug on the heartstrings. There's some very real things that happened in his life that were really, really great to see portrayed here in this film, and I think Rami Malek does a fantastic job playing Freddie Mercury. I think he was fantastic casting. I remember that they were initially going to cast Sacha Baron Cohen, who's very famous for being characters like Borat and Bruno, but he's a really great actor and he's a really talented just guy in general, so I would have loved to have seen him in the role, but I think Rami Malek was the perfect choice, and I had a great time watching him play Freddie Mercury. This film has a fantastic cast and has great cameos in here like Mike Myers, which I really enjoyed. He has a very, very on-the-nose cameo in here, and I love seeing him in this movie. And this is just a beautifully well-acted film. I can't remember the guy's name right now. I can't remember if it's Joseph Mosello or Joshua Mosello, but the guy who played the young kid in the first Jurassic Park movie is actually in this film as well, which I thought was really cool. As a huge Jurassic Park fan, I love being able to see him. You don't really see him in too many movies these days, so to be able to see him in such a big movie, and I really enjoyed his part in this film. It was a nice little Easter egg, or not necessarily an Easter egg, but just a nice casting choice for me. I really enjoyed that. The cast on it overall did such a great job in this film portraying Queen and everybody who surrounded that band. There was a sense of stakes, a sense of excitement, and just as a Queen fan, I had a great time listening to their music throughout this film and just having a great time just kind of being able to see how they became the band that they did. Now, of course, like I mentioned, this film does skip over some things, but for the most part, it tells the basic story and the things that you need to know. There are some things that, of course, are going to be a little bit more glamorized, and some things that are going to kind of be viewed as a bigger deal maybe in their career than it actually was, but for the sake of the movie, they have to kind of portray it as this 3-act structure that's going to give you a little bit more of like this kind of feeling about certain things. But I think it was really, really well done. I had such a great time with this movie. It was incredibly well acted, like I mentioned, very well directed, which I guess I should mention this film was directed by Bryan Singer. If I'm not mistaken, somebody else came in. I'm not entirely sure who came in to actually finish directing the film or just kind of finish putting it together, but the film was originally directed by Bryan Singer, who ended up having some accusations come out about him, which is just kind of sucks. You know, you have Brett Ratner and Bryan Singer, two directors that directed X-Men movies back in the day that for the most part I really enjoyed, and it's crazy to see that, you know, they've been wrapped up in this kind of creepy element of what's going on in Hollywood right now. But I guess I'm glad to know that some of these people are getting the light shined on them, but I don't really want to talk too much about that. But yeah, Bryan Singer did direct this project, and I've enjoyed a lot of the movies that he's directed, and he did have to leave the film in the later half of the production, or like I think I'm just near the end of actually putting the film together. But I did thoroughly enjoy this film. It is, again, very well acted. It has such a great sense of stakes, and if you're a fan of their music throughout it, I was just engaged, you know. It was great to hear their music throughout it, and I've always just had a great time with biopics like this, specifically a biopic that has to deal with a musician or a band or something like that, where it's just kind of about their rise and maybe their rise and fall. But in this case, there are falls, but it's really about the rise of the band, the impact that they had on society, the impact that they've had on pop culture. And I think most people in this world probably know a handful of Queen songs at least, and it's just really great to go back and revisit their songs throughout the course of this film. I have very minor negatives when it comes to this film. There are some things that felt a little skimmed over, some things that were a little bit rushed, but for the most part, I had a really good time with this film. I was never really bored watching this movie. As a fan of Queen, I found myself having a smile on my face the entire time. I was also really, really engaged in Rami Malek. I would say when it comes to Rami Malek's performance, the one thing that kind of distracted distracted me from time to time was the teeth. Now, if you know anything about Freddie Mercury and just his overall look and his vibe, you know, he had a fairly large mouth, and part of that was he had these very in-your-face teeth. He had some big teeth, and in this movie, I feel like I've seen some people kind of describe it as a hair and teeth movie or a wig and teeth movie. This movie definitely is that, in the sense that it's the kind of movie where a lot of the actors are wearing very noticeable wigs and they're wearing, you know, dentures or different things like that, specifically Rami Malek, where it's about the hair and the teeth that really kind of sell you on the character. So right out of the gate, you already know who he is and what he's trying to go for, simply because of the teeth. It kind of gives him a whole different persona. But I really enjoyed it. After a while, it wasn't as distracting, but I do think that they did a good job with what they had to, and of course he had to wear fake teeth. So it's one thing to have big teeth that are your own teeth, and it's a whole nother thing to try to act like somebody who had bigger teeth and then try to close your mouth with these fake dentures. So yeah, that's just a very minor nitpick, but yeah, I had a great time with this movie. I just kind of wanted to ramble about it on camera a little bit, and this is a film that I think if you have not already seen, I highly recommend. I think if you were even slightly a fan of Queen or their music, or you know some of their biggest hits, I think that you definitely should check out this film. It's a beautifully well acted film that really tells a great story of a man who went on to become an icon, a legend, and it's crazy because in the midst of it, he dealt with so much, whether it was his ego, whether it was the illness of with the AIDS, or the, you know, hiding his homosexuality or different things like that. It's just really crazy to watch this movie and really just realize, even though I already knew the story, just how much the man went through and how much, you know, he did that would end up making him an iconic figure in rock and roll and in music in general. He's one of the most iconic people in pop culture when it comes to music. The music that he was a part of writing is some of the most iconic music of all time, and it's really crazy to just see how much sadness he went through and how much heartache he went through and how much he really had to hide himself throughout the course of his life, even though everybody loved him so much. And it's so crazy to see, even this far into the future, how much Queen is still loved by so many, including myself. So yeah, guys, this is gonna be my review of Bohemian Rhapsody. If you have not already seen this movie, go do yourself a favor and check it out. And yeah, I've already said it, but as a fan of Queen, as a fan of Freddie Mercury, and as just a fan of rock and roll, you know, this film does such a great job of celebrating what Queen was all about, celebrating their music, celebrating them as individuals, celebrating Freddie Mercury, despite them showing the things that were the negative sides of things and the things that kind of make a band, you know, the things that bands have to go through sometimes, that sometimes bands break up or they hate each other. But just to see the camaraderie that they had, even in the dark times, and even through everything they went to when they were kind of apart and when they came back, yeah, I had such a great time with this film. I had a really, really good time watching it. I highly recommend it. This is a film I don't really get bored watching, and I'm really excited to continue to watch it as the years goes on. So definitely leave your comments down below, guys. Do you enjoy this movie? Do you not like this movie? Do you enjoy the portrayal that Rami Malek did of Freddie Mercury? I loved it, but I would love to hear what you guys have to say. So leave those comments down below. Hit that like button if you guys enjoyed this video. And as usual, you guys can see me in the next video. Bye-bye.